I'm so pleased to be here tonight with all of the artists from the Beyond Resilience exhibition that is currently up at the Museum of Art, Fort Collins. The show is up up until September 14th, so not very much longer. And we wanted to do this Zoom talk um, towards the end of the exhibition so that people who had the chance to see the work in person could. And then we could have this talk with the artists from the show. It's a really impactful show and unfortunately very timely with so many of the things that are in the news these days. Although obviously we know this has been going on for a very long time. Beyond Resilience, the idea came about many years ago in looking at the systemic issues related to the patriarchy and the way that it harms women primarily, but it harms everyone. It harms men and women. I began looking for artists who were making work that addressed these issues from lived experience, from personal experience. I was interested in different in the ways that this manifests in not only in American culture but other cultures because it is so prevalent around the world. Ultimately the goal with this show is to show what is happening, what women are enduring, and to ask sort of the question, can we do better for ourselves and our children? And to hope that people who would see this show would see the work and now hear the artists think about ways in which that we can do better, that we can stop so many of these issues and that we can do better for our children. And you'll hear from the artists tonight whose work is in the show and who I felt so very grateful to work with. They're all incredible women and have made incredible work. I was so lucky to be in the gallery today again and see it again, and I'm moved every time from your work. Um,
Welcome and thank you to everyone who's taking the time to present or listen or be part of this conversation and story. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you. So my project, Woman Wearing Ring Shields Face from Flash, began as most of my things do, which was really a collection of images. And I think one of the most powerful things about a photograph is that alone it can suggest a story or suggest a place or a time or an incident or an event. But when you put a group of similar photographs together, they can reveal an orchestra of information. And I think that's where this started from, was that idea of an orchestra of information. I had found on eBay a collection of 39 photographs of handguns, and the person selling them didn't know where they were from. So they didn't have an origin point, but there's a lot you can tell if you take the time to look. They're all 5 by 7 inch prints. They're all gloss. They're all black and white. They were all photographed with a flash. The gun is lying down on a cardboard background. They're all facing the same way and perhaps suggest that the person who laid them out, which may not have been the photographer, was right-handed. And on the back of every single one of these, there is written in blue ink, the make, model, and serial number of the gun. So there are all kinds of suggestions that might lead to understanding where these lived or what these were for. And I wasn't looking to make something about guns. I was just intrigued by how much visual and other information could be contained within this one image, in this case, 39 images. And I started putting them into conversation with other collections of photographs that I have. I have years and years worth of collections that are not very well archived. But I have one of these is a collection of men's hands, mostly taken indoors in the studio, performing different kinds of gestures. They're oftentimes a reaching or a grabbing gesture. Sometimes there's clothing shown, sometimes there's not. And so I started laying these out on my studio table trying to look for connections. And I didn't realize what a long history that photography and guns and gunship have, that it comes well before our use of photography, that guns were often incorporated into camera technology and vice versa. You're looking here at a spy camera that's shaped like a gun. That this is Etienne Jules Marais, who was a French scientist who in the late 1800s designed and built a chronophotographic gun so that he could study the motion of birds in flight. And it took about 14 frames per second, but it's shaped like a rifle. And this, there's this ongoing history. George Eastman, founder of Eastman Kodak, had used gun cotton as a material, as a fiber, for creating what we now use as flexible roll film in cameras. And that's just the small part of it. And as I kept searching for images to place into a something, because as soon as I call it a project, it narrows it and contains it in a way that I don't always like. I was just looking for fodder. I was looking for content. When I searched for photographs of men with guns, I would see photographs of war, cowboys, men dressed up, men performing with this object. When you search for women with guns, regardless of whether it was an archive, a thrift store, an online selling place, you would find women dressed up like this, wearing a gun as a prop, or the gun position to imply something else or something other, usually something sexual. And this got me then interested in looking back at advertising where, in this case, this is Michael Landon. He would have probably been appearing in Little House on the Prairie at this time. And he was hired by Kodak to promote cameras mostly to women, these little snapshot cameras that were cheap and easy to carry so that women could photograph their children mostly, but using the language of infantry drills, in this case ready, aim, flash, which comes from ready, aim, fire. And that, this is the gift that just keeps shooting. So there's this vocabulary that's used across guns and photography, and that sort of narrowed my focus and made me think about the ways in which guns as rather cameras as objects are used to take, and what are we taking when we use them. And I started looking for photographs of the rejection of that kind of aggression when permission is not sought to have your photograph taken. And what does that manifest? What does that look like as a form of protecting oneself and shielding oneself and keeping one's identity to oneself? And I found hundreds and hundreds of snapshots from all kinds of sources of women doing just that, often their hands to their face, often in private domestic spaces, not in public spaces. And when I searched for men doing the same thing, I have less than 10 of those snapshots in my collection, having searched for years and years. And that was also very interesting and very powerful as a potential kind of conversation to me about who takes the right of the object and then what they use that right for. Like, what are they taking in that process? Similarly, that led me to searching for more photographs. I already had a small collection of men taking pictures, and just how many there were. And I still don't know who takes the pictures of the men taking pictures. But when I searched for women taking photographs, women holding cameras, there were very few, but many, many of men taking pictures, and this device covering the real estate of their face. And the more I researched, the more I found this intertwining between these objects that are ostensibly, everyday objects. They are built for the comfort and the speed of the hand. They're built as an extension of our bodies, but that doesn't mean that we should be always using them in the way that perhaps photography was teaching me and showing me as a form of evidence that they were being used. And so I started putting these photographs in conversation together, and to build this this archive and this story of something that is seen but also unseen. It's witnessed and it's not witnessed, and it's so commonplace that we are photographed, in a medium to large size city in America now upwards of 70 times a day without our knowledge. That what does that mean for being able to protect a sense of self and to protect how we navigate the world? And I just kept finding images that came together in this book, and that the title of the book, Women Wearing Ring Shields Face from Flash, that's part of this beautiful exhibition with so many voices, was this sort of speaking of a condition of everydayness that exists but has existed for a very long time. It just hadn't been put together in this way. Women as props, women giving props to hold that are guns to become a flattened kind of object, i.e., the photograph. And how when you zoom in on these seemingly kind of nothingness that happens every day, you find that people are being looked at and taken, and that this vocabulary just continues. That there is, it makes me think about questions about who has the ability to use these objects, who's granted a sort of a blindsiding in the world. Like, if you see someone carrying a camera, do you always notice it? Do you always know what they're doing? Similarly with a gun, how we're taught indirectly to always notice where someone's hands are, and that hands, the way we look at others when we have a camera. What are we looking at, or what are we looking for, and why we're doing that? And so, as part of the exhibition, it felt really important for people to be able to bring their hands and their histories to the object of the book, because the book is something that there are all kinds of books that are being taken away from us, that are being reduced in numbers in schools, that we don't have access to anymore. And I wanted people to come into this space and not only see the work on the wall, but to be able to have their say with their hands in a book, in something that isn't filled with words. This is filled with pictures that tell stories, and have told stories that overlap and intertwine for a really long time, about all kinds of seemingly very soft forms of violence, but that can cause real pain to people, and the way we're seen, and the way where and how we gain our knowledge, either by experience or the world, or through books. And so I wanted people to be able to put their hands in this book and to draw on my books and to make a form of art that they can contribute to, that feels more powerful and meaningful and protective and safe, and that they can have their say very freely and very willingly, unlike when you're photographed without your permission.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Hamida, for the introduction and for curating such a powerful exhibition. Thank you, all of you, also for joining us tonight. The project that I want to talk and is actually in the exhibition called Threads of Freedom. This project grew out of my ongoing research into how women are represented in photographic media and how individual identities are performed. I'm also constantly interrogating the boundaries of the medium and try to experiment with the physical aspect of photography. Before starting, I want to give you a warning that there are photographs and stories in this presentation that show violence in response to protest, some of which may be difficult or disturbing. The governmental control over women's bodies in Iran has always been my concern. For the majority of Iranian women, without any state sanction for self-representation, social media became a step forward in reclaiming their images. Many activists use this space to show images of women's empowerment and publish their selfies, and they protest against discriminatory laws. This is powerfully demonstrated in the Women Life Freedom Movement. In September 2022, Mahsa Amini, a young Iranian woman, was arrested by the morality police for the crime of not wearing her headscarf properly. Mahsa was taken to a detention center where she went into a coma and later died in the hospital. After this incident, people, particularly women, have been coming to the street, removing and brandishing their headscarf and burning them or cutting their hair. These acts of protest do not end in the street. Women continue practicing civil resistance in the virtual space by sharing images of themselves on social media. As I currently reside outside my home country, I find myself overwhelmed yet empowered by the shared images that connect us. So I started this project and the creative process by collecting publicly shared selfies of Iranian women. The digital images of protest are printed on silk fabric, then mixed, layered, deconstructed, and reconstructed through hours of tedious work. I remove threads from the weft of fabric one by one. The process for me is a form of protest, a way to resonate with the struggle, to participate by reweaving our stories, and in so doing, amplify the significance of their actions. The reason I choose fabric is because throughout history, women have had a complex relationship with making and consuming fabric. Fabric was utilized to simultaneously conceal, beautify, as well as objectify women's bodies. In this project, I try to redefine traditional entanglements between fabric, woman, and representation by focusing on the material I use, which is fabric. Particularly in this piece, I recombined 4 photographs Iranian women took of themselves in the street. The photographs depict women after they have removed their headscarf in front of Azadi Tower in Tehran, while, as you see, making the victory symbol with their hands. These photographs not only challenge representation of women as docile, domesticated, and typically horizontal or reclining, but they also reclaim the public places that belong to them and that they have been historically excluded for almost a half century. Fruits of Defiance was another piece that was included in the exhibition. The work addresses the profound imbalance between tools of protesters and the trauma that the state inflict on the body. The work, as you see here, display a combination of photos of fire, a stone, and a hand painted in red as a weapon of protest, paired against images of a shoulder injured by shotgun pellet, a stitched skin following a liver transplant after being tortured in prison, and an injured eye. So this is one of the images that I used. The woman who shared this image, her name is Elham Modarisi, who was arrested and imprisoned for participating in protest, has posted this photograph of herself. She was tortured physically and psychologically in prison, causing her to lose her liver. The photograph is a close-up of her skin, showing stitches and bruises after liver transplant surgery. There is also a drawing of a sprout on her skin, and she added this text also, which is a poem, to her post. Many people also in Iran visit cemeteries to support the families who have lost their loved one in recent years. In response to protesters' actions, the Islamic regime has burned many of the graves along with their memorials to threaten the protesters and their families. The work here also depicts the mother of a protester who was killed lying beside her son's grave. Wreath is a large installation that was included in the exhibition, including 8 different pieces, each of which tells a story of defiance in a cemetery. The threads coming out of the larger frames are either photographs of graves covered with colorful flowers or graves broken and memorial burned by the government. By deconstructing the frame and overlapping threads, I try to show the overlapping of stories and their entanglements. Also, the geometric shape of the wreath also confront the prohibition of representation of living being in Islamic art. So wreath has 8 petals, and petal 1, for example, here is a story of a 9-year-old boy. His name was Kian, who was shot while sitting in his parents' vehicle. His mother's selfies and speeches, particularly in the cemetery after his death, reflect how women took part in the uprising and how the situation taught them to stand up and speak out. Another one portrays the daughter of a victim standing at her mother's grave with a shaved head, holding her long black hair recently cut in her left hand. The 4 smaller rectangular shape actually show the protester who hold a photograph of the family member who was killed. This installation for me is a memorial of memorials that show how a camera in the hand of a woman can amplify and sustain the power of resistance. The work also shows how a cemetery can transform into a place of defiance and how a grave can become a site of protest. So, and finally, photographs are not really passive objects. Their affective power influence social, political, and cultural change. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. And just another special thank you for the museum for hosting us, and to Hamida for curating the show, and to all of the artists for sharing their work tonight. I'm really, really excited to hear all of you talk about your practices. And I'm so honored for my work to be included in Beyond Resilience. One of my projects in the exhibition is Remnants, which is an exploration of the successes or failures of the reactionary structures that are responsible for engaging victims of sexual and domestic abuse. The photographs in this work function as a linear narrative, and all of these aspects create a complicated and very intimidating maze of steps that survivors do have to maneuver if they choose to rely on the justice system for assistance. Remnants exists as a photographic evidence of the reality many face when assaulted. A 2014 report by the Department of Justice estimated that 34.8 cases of sexual assaults are reported to the authorities. Sexual and domestic assault happens everywhere. It's on campus, it's in good neighborhoods, it's in bad neighborhoods, safe spaces, churches. It truly is a public health issue plaguing all of us. Each and every assault is complex and nuanced in its circumstances. The victims who reside in these spaces are often unable to just leave due to financial dependence, sharing children with their assailant, the threat of homelessness, or love. One of the most dangerous things a person can do in an abusive relationship can do is leave their abuser, as that is when their material danger is the highest. If a survivor of sexual assault leaves the site of their trauma and goes to the authorities to report their assault, they are sent to the hospital and they undergo something called a sexual assault evidence collection exam. There are 8 invasive steps in this exam in which saliva, swabs of bodily fluids, and even underwear are collected and compiled into a sexual assault evidence collection kit, most commonly known to us as a rape kit. Enduring a rape kit exam is re-traumatizing, takes hours, and is incredibly invasive. The victim often needs to be photographed to document any marks or injuries on their body, and it is the archiving of the crime that is both incredibly difficult yet essential for seeking justice. After the exam is completed, the kit gets sent to a police evidence room where it sits until the police decide or the victim pushes for it to be sent to the testing lab. This is why there are over 700,000 rape kits sitting in storage today across the United States, and that's what we refer to as the rape kit backlog. I'm very interested in how trauma manifests or proves itself in physical objects. And when I think of the aftermath of rape, so much of the leftovers are invisible and hard to convince others of its visceral nature. Anytime I'm standing alone with these boxes and my camera in lifeless police evidence rooms, I feel the banality of evil stronger than I ever have before. If a victim's kit is sent to a lab, the quality of the lab depends largely upon where they live and the types of funding available to them. Whether their criminology labs are well funded, either privately or publicly or at all, determines the quality of the testing a rape kit receives. These are publicly funded DNA testing labs in both Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Youngstown, Ohio. This is the same functional workspace for examining and photographing evidence. Despite sexual assault cases being cited as the most likely to reap the benefits of DNA typing, it is estimated that only 30% of the tasks completed by publicly funded crime labs are DNA typing requests. You also see the newspaper that I created out of remnants in Beyond Resilience. And I published this newspaper for elected officials, and it has statistics, transcribed 911 calls, and a call to action designed with education and the urge to allocate funding towards rape kit testing in mind. I believe it's very important to turn my work into something accessible to those who might not be formally trained in the discourse surrounding fine art, and help them realize that while the root cause of rampant gendered violence go deep, there are tangible steps that can be taken towards alleviating the trauma survivors experience and lead to the mitigation of abusers, excuse me. These tangible steps look like anything from dismantling stereotypes surrounding survivors to diverting public funding to testing the rape kit backlog. To quickly contextualize the other work that is also shown in the exhibition, I want to mention Worthy, a photographic investigation that I've undertaken exploring the realities that criminalized survivors of intimate partner violence face in the U.S. carceral system after acting against their abusers in self-defense. The same legal system that failed to protect survivors from abusers uses all of their resources to incarcerate victims. The jailing of victims fighting for their lives is a plague that affects survivors across the board, but the horrors of the carceral system affect Black, Brown, Indigenous, and LGBTQIA and two-spirited individuals more than their cis and white counterparts and community members. It is an issue that is out of control, aided and abetted by systems of patriarchy that have a chokehold on our culture. For the majority of individuals who find themselves in these situations, they are punished for defending themselves, or they die at the hands of their abusers when they don't. I want to ask people what the idea of justice looks like when the idea of a perfect victim is a fantasy. My other body of work in Beyond Resilience, titled I Will Bite the Hand That Feeds, is both diaristic and universal as I mentally process the time I've spent in prisons and courtrooms while producing Worthy. It is compiled of both my own excuse me, I live in a city. There's always emergency vehicles going by. It is compiled of both my own as well as appropriated and manipulated imagery that I've collected into my own archive to make sense of what I've seen and lived. So much of my work has to be documentary and literal, and this project opens the door for me to play with imagery and ambiguity. While producing Worthy, I've had to consider what it means to closely bear witnesses to systems that actively harm my community under the guise of assistance and justice. A need has arisen to confront those that wield power and perpetuate violence in their words and actions, or ask us to say thank you for less than the bare minimum. Due to my experiences in courtrooms, I think a lot about Anita Hill, who blew the whistle on Clarence Thomas in court in the 90s for workplace sexual harassment. She put her career and reputation on the line to advocate for herself very publicly and was still punished for speaking out on her own behalf. Clarence Thompson now sits on the United States Supreme Court and is partially responsible for many of the federal steps back that we've taken, including the overturning of Roe v. Wade. How much evidence do survivors need to be believed and taken seriously? The series of images of famous survivors or whistleblowers honors these women's experiences on the stand. I think of Christine Blasey Ford, who in 2018 publicly accused Brett Kavanaugh, a then Supreme Court nominee, of sexually assaulting her while they were in college together. Her safety was compromised. He was still given the Supreme Court. He is partially responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade. I wonder if we see the pattern here. I'm thinking of Jean Carroll, who also accused Donald Trump of abusing her, and he was found guilty and forced to pay out $83 million in damages. And it's still not enough for abusers to lose any type of public support, power, or even the presidency. As an artist, it is very easy for me to imagine a better world beyond resilience and beyond crushing and violent patriarchy. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Shu Yuan, and it's my great honor to be invited here. Thanks to Hamida, thanks to the museum and all the artists who joined in. It's been a great pleasure. So Hamida included two bodies of my work in the exhibition. One is called My Great-Grandmother, My Grand-Aunt, My Grandmother, My Mother, and I. I finished the project in 2022. Actually, it was the very first body of artwork I had in my life. And the second project's called Grace Orchid. So basically I've got so here is where I am in the museum. I have 6 images from the 2022 work, and then 3 new images from Grace Orchid. And yeah, to start with this project, my great-grandmother, my grand-aunt, my grandmother, my mother, and I. So as you can see from the title, it is a work about 4 generations of women. So the story starts with my mom. When my mother was born, they wanted another son in the family, so they basically drowned her in the water and tried to kill her, but they didn't manage to do so, so she was sent to her aunt's family as a child bride. And her aunt, who is also her adoptive mother, was also a child bride. She was sent to the family after 15 days of her birth, and she never saw her biological parents after that. And for my grandmother, I always thought she was like a victim to my mom. Oh, like not victim, she was like a murderer to my mom. But then I noticed that because her mother wanted to give birth to another son, but couldn't do that because of health condition. So she was given a boy's name, and she was called the second grandpa in our family by my cousins. So I feel like that's why when she got married, she wanted a second son so desperately. So she tried to kill my mother. She didn't manage to do so, and she strangled her second daughter to death, like my mom's younger sister, to death right after her birth. And then she finally gave birth to my younger uncle, so who is also my mom's like younger brother. So that was like the family happened, like the story happened in the family. I always knew about the story, but I didn't really investigate about the story. So when I was in undergrad, I had like the funding, so I went back for field research. And so I started to know about the story. So what I did with this group of work was I felt like I was not really documenting the story, but rather I was like a director. So I bought them all the props, I bought them all the clothes and set up like the white backdrop and bought the chickens as well. So I always found chickens really fascinating to me because in my memory there is always an image that all of the women were sitting together and they killed the chicken, they put the chicken in hot water and remove all the feathers. But then like chicken is such a strong symbol of rural patriarchy, rural patriarchal power. So I felt like that was really ironic. I'm sorry. That was my mom holding the chicken. And that's like my female elders when they remove the feathers of the chicken in like hot boiling water. And this is a very intriguing image. I'm glad Hamda chose it because so when I talked to my grand aunt. I never knew her name. So in our village, we call her Wu Chen. So Wu is like, oh, so on our family tombstone, we call her Wu Chen. Wu being her adoptive father's surname, and Chen being her biological father's surname. And also in the village, people call her Chao Ling's wife, and I call her Grandma Yu Chao because Yu Chao is the name of her first grandson. It was until I saw this like prize, I noticed her name. Her name was Cheng Deying. And it was really ironic because, as you can see on this prize, it says that Comrade Chen Deying was awarded the title of the second filial piety moral model for Badou Township. And it's from the government and also from the party committee, like the Communist Party of this town. So I feel like it was really ironic because she never got her name. But then after she fulfilled all the tasks, the filial, like all the tasks that the patriarchal society asked her to do, and finally she got her name back as a prize, as a reward. So that's like very, very ironic to me, and that was like the only thing she had in her life to keep her name. So she brought it, like when they were like moving, she brought it to the new houses and put it on the wall right after they moved to like a new house. So she treated it very, very seriously. And the other body of work called Grace Orchid. So Grace lan hua. So it like Grace is like 从容, so it's means like calm. And so that's my mom's name. My mom's name is 从容. And then Orchid, that's my grandmother's name. Her name is lan hua, so Orchid in English. So for this group of work, it's like a continuous project on the previous projects. So I went back last year in 2024 when my grandfather passed away. So my grandfather, he suffered 7 years of dementia. So basically the whole household of women were taking care of him. And on his funeral, that was the very first time I saw my mom and my grandmother hugging. So they were crying and they were hugging. So my mom always had this really cold tone, really weird and cold tone when she speaks to my grandmother, because she was like a murderer, but at the same time, she was her mother at the end of the day. So she was always feeling weird about her mother. And when I was like on the night that my grandfather passed away, everybody went to the funeral house except for my grandmother. I was there accompanying her. And when we were talking about past stories, and she started to like she found a pouch in her closet. And in the pouch there were photos of herself, my grandfather, and also my mom. I was very astonished because she collected all of my mom's like childhood photos, like the photos on her college ID card, and also a lot of her prizes. And she was so proud of my mom. She told me that your mom is the first kid who, like, your mom is the only kid who went to college in the family. So she was very proud of her. She kept all the identification, all the photos, everything. But when I asked my mom, and my mom knew nothing about that. So that made me make the photo in the middle. So this was like the photos I found in my grandmother's pouch, with my mom's hand holding her photo and my grandmother's hand holding like her own photos. And another thing is about the village. So as you can see, I don't know if maybe it's not clear enough, but the village itself was demolished right after the previous project was made, so in 2022. So basically they moved out of the village. It was because of urbanization. And they've got new houses. But when I asked both of them how they feel about the new houses, the new village, they said that they felt like their memories were fading away because the old houses, the old ancestral houses where they lived for decades, were not there anymore. So I thought that's also part of the collective trauma. So basically in this group of work, so this is like the photo of our old house, the ancestral house, and the new houses in the background. So I was thinking about this. So basically this new project is about how trauma separated women, and but at the end of the day, they brought women back together. So this project is more about tenderness, forgiveness, and the love between women, while the previous project's more about intergenerational trauma and how like what did the women suffer from patriarchy. And yeah, something amusing, Cuddle's new portrait. Just that's my dog. And thank you.
Okay, thank you all for being here tonight. So this is the project Seeds of Strength and Resilience. In recent years, recent reproductive rights have become a more restricted and contested issue. And I've been thinking about this, and I was thinking about how this happened. I wondered what people had done before modern medicine and what the history of this was. How have women dealt with this issue for centuries? And how has this affected the independence and autonomy of women? And I've also wondered, what will the future hold? So I started by researching the history of abortion and reproductive rights. And I learned that the practice of herbal abortion has been used for centuries, going back to the days of Aristotle. Recipes and methods using botanicals were part of a medical practice in ancient Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Greek societies. I've learned that there's a long history of women taking control of their destiny and bodies with the use of botanicals. And of course, I'm not a doctor. I'm not necessarily condoning these methods um, because the practice of herbal abortion is not safe, oftentimes, or reliable. For this project, I researched, collected, and photographed many of the botanicals. I began with plants physically located where the case of Roe v. Wade began, layering this subject with its history. The materials and process for the work were chosen carefully. Many of the images are printed on kozo paper, which is known for its delicacy and strength. And I see that as a metaphor for women and this issue. I've also applied 24 karat gold leaf to parts of the prints, which I see as a symbol of hope, especially for those affected by abortion restrictions. The use of gold is also a nod to the practice of kintsugi, where gold is used to mend broken ceramics and is known symbolically for its strength, resilience, and healing. And I've used it in small parts on the top of many of the images, also as symbolic of healing as well as strength. Other images in the series were created using the phytogram process, and this is where the plant chemistry mixes with other chemicals to form an image on film or photosensitive materials. And it's the same plant chemistry that was used in historical herbal abortifacents, further connecting the materials and the concept. And this is an example of one of those phytograms. And here's another phytogram. The process is inherently messy and fluid, and I see it as naturally relating to the body, as indicated in the titles. These works use the phytogram as a negative, and then they are printed as cyanotypes, which ties in the notion of time with this issue, as cyanotype is a historical process, and as this is an issue that has gone back centuries. And you can see from the titles here, this is titled Ovaries, because I see a relationship to that. The works have gold leaf applied to the back of them, and they're varnished. And the use of gold, again, acts as a symbol of hope and healing. And you can see the titles, either refer to the body, they might refer to the plant itself, or to the history of this issue. So in this one, not to be confused with poison hemlock, it's referring to, how dangerous some of these recipes can be in some situations. And it's not really the right solution when we have better solutions out there. I'm interested in drawing the viewer into the work, so I've made it beautiful yet haunting. I want the viewer to inspect the image further, question what it is, and to think about the issue or have conversations about the issue. The title of this piece refers to a book of antidoriums or recipes that were used in medieval times. The recipes were considered older than the book and were probably passed down in an oral tradition. And many recipes are also lost because of this oral tradition that had existed for many years. And this image also refers to that oral tradition. It was a chain of learning amongst women to keep many of the recipes and the traditions alive. In this one, I also sort of see the plants as almost stand ins for the women themselves, kind of grouped together almost as if they're having a conversation. In my research, I came across a quote from the early 1900s as a woman described her experience as a cloud of relief. This points to the autonomy and power of reproductive rights and its necessity to save lives and create a more caring society. I'm concerned for women with few options, for those treated unfairly, and for the future of reproductive rights. As I've mentioned, it's been important to me to portray this issue in a haunting yet beautiful way. The haunting or darker aspects of these images honor the women who have died, or will die unnecessarily or become seriously ill due to various pregnancy complications, or who are forced to carry a pregnancy against their will under current legal restrictions. Under the same laws, other women have been unjustly imprisoned for experiencing miscarriage that has been mistaken for abortion, or have been denied care in hospital settings out of fear of legal action. The positive and beautiful elements of this project are conceptually tied to my hope for a future that offers universal availability and accessibility of safe, modern medical abortion practices that promote the health and well being of women, children, and ultimately society. Thank you.
Ang petiwash de mi takuyapi Danielle C. Walker Amachiapi, Mahungpapa Lakota na Ochetishakueni Mahata, Denver, Colorado, Awati. Good afternoon, everyone. I always like to greet myself in my native language. I am Lakota from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, and it's important for me to speak my language out loud because at one point it was almost on the verge of extinction due to colonization. I always like to acknowledge and give acknowledgement to my ancestors, my grandmas, and before I start any presentation because they sacrificed a lot, and I wouldn't be here today having these opportunities without their sacrifices. And I say that because they went through boarding school, and we Native people aren't supposed to be here today. Our governments were trying to eradicate us. But we're still here and we're thriving, successful, contributing members of our communities. So these are my grandma in the red shirt, and then her mother to the left, Gertrude Blue Lips, and my other auntie, Nancy Blue Lips. And so I'm always humbled and like to acknowledge and honor them. I study a lot of old photos from my community and stories that I've been told by elders about our people because we're not taught those stories in schools in our histories. And so I grew up in this dual world of learning who I am, learning where I come from. But in contrary, I grew up knowing these other stories of that didn't make sense to me of of being Native and how we were bad. And so I go and I study and I go into archives and I look up these images, and which really inform my artwork. These images, the past three I just showed, were all about boarding schools and the first attempt at eradicating my people. And this image is very haunting for me in that it's a boarding school that was established and kids were taken from their families. And I think about how my grandma was taken from her mother without their permission, and she was forced to speak English. Her braids were cut off. She was forced to wear these foreign clothing and was punished very harshly if she were to speak her Lakota language or if she were trying to be Native or be Indian. And these families camped outside of these boarding schools because they wanted to be as close to their children as possible. This is little me, little Danielle, and I wish I could go back in time and tell her things are going to be okay. You're going to be eventually proud of who you are, because there was a period of time where I grew up not being proud of who I was. I felt ashamed and dirty for being Native American and was made to feel that way through a lot of stereotypes and microaggressions. I was faced with a lot of this type of imagery, having to create pilgrims and Indians in school, growing up with cartoons and things that looked like this, and how natives were just very dehumanized and tokenized. We were put on labels and brands. Costumes were dressed up as, I don't know any other race that it's okay to do this. We're sexualized. We are tokenized. We're lucky charms of people. And again, I don't know any other race that you see as mascots. This is the kind of behaviors we see a lot of times at concerts and in public gatherings, at sporting events. And this is the response that I usually get. But I'm honoring you. And that's not true. We're not honored by it. And if we say we're not honored by it and it's not okay, then it's not okay. So a lot of these things really influence me to not only be an artist, but to speak up, to work in legislation, to stand up for my community. My dad once told me, Danielle, if you don't speak up, nobody's going to do it for you. And so I like to call myself sort of an artivist because I'm trying to change the narrative. I'm trying to bring forth these stories that are not often told, that are never told, aside from within my own community. But I want people to understand the other side of history, the other side of who we are. And so I do stand up. And one thing that I'm really passionate about is missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. And I'm one of the founding members of the task force here in Colorado, where we have created legislation with State Senator Jesse Danielson. And we have created law, and we've created an office to address this. This is my brother, my cousin brother. In my Lakota culture, our cousins are our siblings and our aunts and uncles are our other parents. So I refer to him as my brother. He was mysteriously killed on the reservation, and to this day, we don't know how he was murdered or who his perpetrator was. And contrary to belief, these murders and our people go missing more often in non-reservation areas and in urban settings like Denver. This is my auntie, my dad's sister, Birdie, who was murdered right in Colfax, on Colfax and here in Denver, Colorado. And thankfully, we have been able to find out who her perpetrator is. But she is definitely a victim of not only sexual abuse, but also murder and kidnapping. This painting was one of the paintings that was selected by Hamida to be in the show. This one is titled "Lost. Am I a Spirit Now?" and it's addressing kind of this theme of being missing and not having closure. And we think about our relatives who go missing, and we're not sure, are they dead or are they being held captive? Where are they? And as Lakota people, as Native people, we're often we're very connected to our spirits and our ancestors that are in the sky and the stars. And I feel almost like our ancestors that are missing are very confused. Are they a spirit? Are they trapped? Where are they? And so that's what this piece was about. The other piece in the show is called "They Keep Trying to Erase Me and It Won't Work." And that's really about censorship. And this is not the piece, but I don't have an image of it. But if you saw the show, you've seen the piece. But a lot of my work is also around censorship, and it's about Native women that are the subjects of a lot of my paintings and pieces. We have historically always been a matriarchal society. Women were in charge. We were in charge of instructing our homes. We were in charge of making sure our men went out and hunted and and fed our families. We made decisions, and we were delegates within our community. And so when colonization happened, that flipped, and suddenly it became this patriarchal society. But today, even Native women today are taking the charge. We call it the age of the daughters. We're the ones on the front lines. We're the ones in legislation making changes. We're the ones looking for our missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. We're the ones really speaking up and making change. And we're taking back that matriarchal shift. And so this painting here is about being a two-spirit. And I wanted to sort of flip the narrative and talk about how a lot of these colonized concepts that we're told about being gay or queer is bad or wrong or against the church, et cetera. And how, on the contrary, what I grew up learning was that being winkte or being two-spirit was an honor in the family. If you had somebody who was a two-spirit in your family, it was honorable because they had more well-rounded knowledge of both the feminine and the masculine energies. And so that's sort of, this painting was about these two women who are proud of being two-spirit. This is about boarding school, and it was stemmed from a story my grandmother told me when she entered boarding school, that the first thing they did was cut her braids. And as an elderly woman, when she became, free of that captivity, she grew her braids back and had them till the day she passed on. And so I love incorporating braids into this series and this body of work called The Braided Women. It's all about women telling the stories of that I've been told from elders, or stories I've researched, and even current modern day stories that I have experienced. And so I want women to be the one telling these stories through these paintings. And so this piece is about it's about boarding school survivors who said, you can't have our braids. And so that's what this piece is about. This one is about a woman who watched our buffalo disappear. Buffalo used to roam this continent in the millions, and it eventually dwindled down to just a few hundred buffalo left. And a woman that I was close to on my reservation once said, what happens to the buffalo will eventually happen to us. And we were also on the verge of extinction. This one again is about having a seat at that table. But when you have a seat at the table as a BIPOC person, or a brown or black person, a queer person, you get to that table and you're like, I'm finally at this table. But then you realize, do I want to be at this table? And so that's kind of what this painting's about. It's these two women sort of at the table, not sure if they even want to be there, and they want to make their own table. And I won't go through every single one, but I just want to, that's what this whole body of work is about. These women taking back our narrative, telling the stories that, that were erased or censored or flipped. And we're sort of taking back the stories. This particular piece was something I painted last year, as a lot of things were happening in Gaza. And I felt very sad being able to walk around free as I was seeing this horrific imagery on the media and in the news, thinking, wow, I'm so fortunate. But then at the same time, I was drawing parallels. What was happening to them was happened to my people at one point. And so I drew this, or I painted this piece as sort of a solidarity of drawing parallels between the two cultures. And it got me in a lot of trouble. If I lost a residency over it, I was censored, I was not given an opportunity, and it caught wind, and I ended up filing a lawsuit against the government entity that canceled me and censored me, and I eventually won that lawsuit. So it's all about speaking up and holding your truth and saying, no, not this time. I'm also a bead worker. I do a lot of things outside of painting. I'm a muralist as well. I like to sort of do fun things. There's a joke that says that if you give a Native person something, they're going to find a way to beat it. And so we do. I like to, this was a couple years ago, actually in the 2020 election, I beaded this hat, and I just thought it was kind of a fun way to memorialize what was happening in the time, and very relevant again today. And I'm also a writer. I wrote a book a few years ago called Still Here, really just encouraged by me having two sons in middle school at that time, that I just was always, I always thought back of what they were being taught in school, what they weren't being taught in school. And I'd always be that mom marching in when my sons would come home and say, Mom, they told us this. And I'd be like, what? So I eventually just said, I'm going to write a book that's middle school level reading, or, a very easy, quick to read book. And I want to just give it to their teachers. I want to give it to anybody. I want to give it to their peers. I want people to hear from our perspective what it means to be Native. What is a reservation? What are the current issues that we face today? What, it just touches on a lot of different topics, including the missing and murdered Indigenous people crisis that we're all facing today. So I know that's a lot, and it was very quick, but I wanted, in the essence of time, to kind of just blow through it really fast. Thank you so much for sharing space and time.
Thank you, Danielle. Amazing. Are those books available on your website?
They're not actually. I have,
if they want them. I
they
would
can
love to read.
yeah, they can. Anybody that's interested can email me. My email is hello@cwalker.com, which is my last name. They're not, I think, or they can be found on Amazon, I think, as well.
Okay. But so that we
you.
can get them from you directly, though, if we try not to use Amazon.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you brought up at the end the lawsuit. People have been reaching out to me and saying, "Did you see this? Did you see this?" And yeah, I'm just so, and the way it was settled with the different programs that are being implemented, it just seems like a really powerful reaction to what happened. So congratulations, and
thank you.
I'm sure that wasn't easy.
No, but anything that, when you want to make change, it doesn't always come easy. You gotta.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
We've heard from all of our artists. I would love to hear if between the artists, if you have any comments or questions. All of the work is very different, and yet points to a sort of a similar overarching theme that is so relevant. It's like, even what's happening in the news today, it's like, why are we still fighting this? Why is it not changing? But I think, again, it's like Danielle was saying, it's about each of us doing our own part and standing up for the things that we believe in. Art is one of those ways. Putting on exhibitions like this, like the museum agreed to put on, those are just some ways, but we all have different ways that we can stand up for, well, I say women's rights, but it's actually, when we talk about this, but it's patriarchy harms everyone. It's not just women. It's men and women, and outside of the binary, it's people who don't fit into that binary. But but we have the power to change it. And I think that's the hope of the exhibition, is that people who see the work and again hear from the artists think about the ways in which they can make change in their own lives or in their own situations. So I'm just going to read a comment. Thank you to all the artists. Your work is so compelling, sometimes beautiful, sometimes too painful to look at. Each artist's works stand alone and tell stories of the struggles and strength of women. Together, this exhibition is so powerful and serves as a reminder to all of us to remain vigilant and keep stories like these alive. Thank you for that, Kathy. Of the artists, do you have any comments or questions or things that came up when other artists were talking?
I really want to mention about the braids because I figured out that we actually talk about the braids uh on the opening night. So like because me and Daniel, our work is in the same room, and also we all have like the really large braids in our work. So Hamida pointed out, and well, in our culture, braids do not have cultural meanings, but it definitely represents beauty. And when my grandmother, she started to take care of my grandfather, she cut her hair because she needs more time to take care of the man in the family, but not her beauty. So she cut her braids, and I was thinking of what you just mentioned in your presentation, that braids were asked to cut off, and that's a huge, heavy cultural meaning for you. I was like, I'm definitely linking that to your work.
Danielle hasn't seen the show yet, but she's going to see it on Sunday. One thing, Danielle, when you walk in, your images are the first images, your paintings, and they're on one on either side. Shuyan's work is when you walk in, you see it at the back of the room, and there's two large images with where the braids look like they're supposed to connect, and then you make that connection sort of across the space of the braids, and that's what I think what you're talking about. There's also in the show there's an undercurrent of hair that isn't, I don't talk about, but is also an aspect that is policed very heavily, and so that's why I didn't talk about it, but when you look, you can see that the presence of it. Did you want to respond to Shu Yuan, Danielle?
Yeah, sure. Hair, I mean, contrary to, I was looking at your images and I was like, oh my God, those braids. I love that. Hair is very important in my culture. It's something that we honor. I've always been told that well, first of all, we never cut our hair unless somebody in our family passes away, and then it's a way of mourning. Our hair is connected to our spirit. It's almost like I've been told, like, if you cut your hair, it would be like cutting an arm off or something like that. You lose a big part of yourself. And so hair is very important. And since I've been little, I've always had long hair. I've always had to wear my hair in braids. Our braids, when we're taught, when we actually sit and take time to braid, that's a time for us to be thinking about mind, body, and spirit, and our connectedness of like strength and wisdom and our place in the world. So it's sort of a moment in time where you're grounding yourself as you're taking care of yourself, but to think about those things. And so hair is very important and significant in my culture.
Any other observations?
Before the Zoom started, Melissa, you mentioned that you'd been working on your project for 10 years and you were surprised that been working on it for 10 years. Can you talk a little bit about like changes that you've seen
Yeah.
or changes that you haven't seen?
Yeah, we were discussing before everyone joined the call that the body of work that I talked about first, Remnants, I had started making that in 2015. And that was all of a sudden, now it has been 10 years ago, which it kind of snuck up on me. I did not expect that 10 years would pass so quickly. But I think to that point, I I didn't expect. I think I was really naive too. I think I was 22. I was between the ages of 22 and 25 when I was making that work. So I was really young, and I had a lot of conviction that we would continue moving in a positive upward direction. Um, and that is obviously not what we are experiencing right now. We are not experiencing a lot of positive upward direction when it comes to gendered violence. Some of the observations that I have made is like, I think that the Me Too movement that we experienced in 2016 and 2017 has really caused this like rubber band effect where it was largely a social movement, And I think that it was a very important social movement, but I think it shook misogynists to their core, to where we are seeing the rubber band snap back of like so much oligarchy, like from the tech sphere that is running our planet to the celebrity trials that we're also seeing right now that are just like horrific displays of misogyny. So I think that while we're all grappling with issues that are still here, I think that we're getting smarter. I think we're getting smarter at talking about them, and I think we're getting more effective at talking about them. And regardless of that, whether there is material change, I want to go back to Danielle's point as well, where it's just important to continue telling our own stories and just loudly telling our own stories on our own, with our own rules, because I'm tired of hearing other people talk about survivors, and I'm tired of hearing people report on things that they actually don't know anything about. So I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in about like what they have seen change, but I think like imagining something better and different takes so much conviction. And even though it has been 10 years that I have been making this work, I see the value in continuing to do it. And all of us, I think, are making such important work, especially like I feel like I make very literal documentary pictures that are very much like based in evidence and fact. And every single one of the other artists in the show, I think you're talking about large issues, but also how they affect people on a micro level. And that's what I love seeing is seeing the human effect of these issues through generations, through cultures, and I just, yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now. Thank you for asking me that, Marcy. If anyone else would like to weigh in, I would appreciate that. So I can stop talking now.
So I have a question,
Thanks.
a follow-up question, Melissa. So you said that you think that people are getting better at talking about these issues. But I wonder, I mean, obviously there's a huge backlash right now against Me Too, against 2020 equity movement. And so, but I wonder, like, are you still hopeful? I want to find hopeful people out
Yes.
there.
Yes.
Good.
I'm so hopeful. I'm so hopeful. Look at all of us here in this call right now. I'm serious. Like, I think that losing ourselves to despair is bad.
I
And
agree.
what I mean by that is like I think despair allows us to give up. It's important to feel despair. There's so much bad. There's so much bad. I'm not saying like toxic optimism is the answer. However, I think understanding that the people enacting the violence right now are so loud, but there's actually not that many of them. Like most people do not want this. Most people do not want what is going on right now. And it's important to find those people. And I have a lot of hope, and because I think that our small everyday acts against misogyny specifically and gendered violence specifically matter. And the more you call it out and the more you name it and the more you tell your own story, the stronger and louder we will get. I feel very emboldened by the Epstein survivors right now
Mm,
saying, okay, if you're not going to release the list, we're going to release our own list. Like, screw you. Like, we are not waiting for you to release this list that has information about my assault on it. We're going to make our own list.
right.
So I think, like, it's hard. Things are bad. I feel scared. I feel sad. I feel sorrow. But that doesn't like serve anybody at the end of the day to just be really sad about it.
Hmm.
And you know what I mean? And none of us are doing that in my opinion, but I have to be really stubborn. I'm a double Taurus, so that also has a ton to do with it. I refuse to let this be how things end up. This cannot be it.
Yeah.
This can't be it. That's
Yeah.
a scam. We're not doing this. Like I really believe like through our language and our actions, like we can change things.
Yeah. I agree. I go back and forth,
It's just it's
optimist
hard.
and a
Yeah. I
pessimist.
does anyone else like have any of the other artists like how do you stay positive? How do you stay hopeful? I would love to hear from other
And also, if
artists.
we have any questions from the audience, we can take those too. We just have a couple minutes left. Melissa's mother, Margaret, who's here, and I'm so glad she's here. She says, having grown up in the 70s, I've seen so much growth in women's rights that it makes me very sad that we're still fighting for basic human rights and being heard as a woman. But I'm so proud of the next generation to keep fighting. And then Maggie Campbell says, this cannot be it. Reiterating Melissa's point.
I am also fueled by pettiness and spite, and I really don't want them to take up all the space and be the loud ones and be the agitators. Like, we also get to be agitators. And a lot of that comes down to also my, like, I have a lot of audacity due to my whiteness, so I weaponize my whiteness all the time to be able to kind of operate in these spaces and, like, say what I want to say as well. And we should all be doing that, my fellow white people.
Agreed. All right. Well, unless we have other, Katie Kindle says, fantastic work, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing your beauty and your power. Unless we have any other comments or questions, I'm really grateful for all the artists for agreeing to be in the show and sending your beautiful artwork that has touched so many people, and for being here tonight for this Zoom call. You know, art is always important. I know it's a struggle as an artist, but we need you. So keep up the amazing work. And I just would also like to say thank you to the museum again for hosting this show. A lot of museums are canceling shows like this, and so I really applaud Lisa Hatchadorian, and Cheryl Rogers, the exhibitions manager and the executive director, for saying yes to this show and not asking me to change anything. So,
well, I want to thank Hamida for putting together such an incredible, powerful show, and to Odette, Danielle, Mona, Melissa, Shuyan, and Marcy. It really is one of the most powerful shows that we've ever had at the museum. I just want to read a couple comments because I kind of pour over the comment book and get inspiration from it. But here's what some people have been reading or writing. Gratitude for the voice given to the voiceless. Thank you for speaking truth. Resounding, brought me to tears. Gut-wrenching, they speak where there are no words. Beautiful art from ugly stories.
thank you for that. One final word. People have been able to react, and I said this earlier, but in Odette's books, with a red lipstick that looks like a bullet. And I'll be or we'll be making some videos to share on social media, the ones that are, or the parts that are okay for that. And you can see how people have reacted in the books. It's very powerful.
The books are incredible. Oh my God, really
Yeah.
stunning,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. They are really powerful. Yeah. I was sort of shaken when I looked through them. So, all right. Thank you all. Yeah. Just thank you.